Every once in a while, a classic comes back, and instead of honoring what made it special, it completely misses the mark. The New Zealand Story Untold adventure had everything going for it. Nostalgia, charm, and a formula that already stood the test of time. But after spending time with it, this feels like one of those cases where they should have just left the story untold. Jumping into the story and presentation, and I'll be honest guys, this is where things started to fall apart for me pretty quickly. At its core, this is still that classic arcade style puzzle platformer. You're guiding Tiki across different environments, rescuing your fellow Kiwis, and navigating maze-like levels filled with enemies, hazards, and branching paths. And conceptually, that's exactly what you want. That foundation is strong, it's proven, but the presentation here just feels off. The art style is technically more modern, but it lacks personality, it lacks charm, and more importantly, it lacks identity. It honestly feels like the characters are just flat PNGs floating around the screen instead of being part of a living world. There's no weight to their movement, no real animation detail that brings them to life, and very little visual distinction between environments. Everything kind of blends together, and not in a good way. And that charm, the thing that made the original so memorable, it's just not here. The best way I can describe it, this feels like McDonald's in the 80s and 90s versus McDonald's today. Back then, it had character, it had personality, it felt like an experience. Now, it's clean, it's modern, but it's also very sterile. And that's exactly how this game comes across. Alright, let's jump into the gameplay, and this is where things really started to break down for me. The core loop is still there. You're platforming, dodging enemies, collecting power-ups. There are even some fun mechanics here, like turning into a witch, using lasers, or getting speed boosts that change how you approach levels. And I'll give the game credit, there are moments where it is kind of fun. There are flashes of what made the original special. Some of the level layouts are clever, and when everything lines up just right, you can see the potential. But those moments are inconsistent, because the biggest issue here is how the game feels. The controls just aren't tight or precise, and in a game like this, that's everything. You're constantly navigating small platforms, tight jumps, and fast-moving sections, but the physics feel off. There's this strange disconnect between what you expect your character to do and what actually happens on screen. Tiki drops faster than expected, movement feels a little too slippery at times, and I found myself constantly overcorrecting. And that leads to something that shouldn't be happening in a game like this. You're not always failing because of your decisions, you're failing because the game doesn't feel reliable. And then we get to the biggest issue of them all, and this goes hand in hand with the art direction, and that's visibility. There were multiple times where I ran straight into spikes because the spikes blend into the environment. They don't stand out, they don't pop, they just sit there waiting to take you out, and you don't even realize that you hit a spike until you notice you're missing a heart. And the more I played, the more I realized this wasn't just happening occasionally, it was happening consistently, and that's not a get good situation, that's a fundamental design issue. Now let's talk performance, because this one genuinely surprised me too. I played this on Steam Deck OLED docked, and for a game like this, you would expect it to run flawlessly. This isn't pushing any boundaries. It's not a visually demanding game, so naturally, I set it to 1440p at 60 FPS, and it just wasn't holding that consistently. So I dropped it down to 1080p, tried different settings, even went uncapped with VSync, and the frame pacing was still inconsistent. What makes it even more frustrating is that there are moments where the game runs at a smooth 60 FPS, and when it does, it actually feels better, but those moments don't last, and in a fast-paced arcade-style platformer, consistency isn't optional, it is required. And unfortunately, this game just doesn't deliver that, and it should on Steam Deck OLED. Now, jumping into pacing and challenge, structurally, this is actually one of the stronger aspects of the game. It's built around short, arcade-style levels, which makes it perfect for quick sessions. You can jump in, play a few levels, and feel like you've made a little bit of progress. That part works, but the challenge doesn't always feel fair, and again, it all ties back to the same issues that really shouldn't be issues: visibility, control precision and performance, because when those things aren't dialed in, the difficulty starts to feel artificial. You're not being tested, you're being tripped up. The only thing that's really being tested is your patience and how much longer you're going to sit through this. As far as content goes, this is a fairly straightforward package. Multiple worlds, boss fights, power-ups, new additions like an overworld map, which actually looks pretty good. It checks the boxes. But here's where things get tricky. The game feels like it was made for fans of the original, which I am one of those, but without fully understanding what those fans actually appreciated about the original. Because if you've played the original, you know how tight it felt, you know how readable it was, and you know how satisfying it was to play, and that's where this version struggles mightily. Now, when it comes to fun factor, there is something here, there really is. The arcade DNA is still present, the power-ups are interesting, the weirdness gives it some identity, but it's just constantly being held back. And because of that, it's hard to stay fully engaged for long stretches. This feels like a game that you want to enjoy more than you actually do. And when it comes to replayability, I just don't see myself going back to this at all. Now, this is the part that really stuck with me, because this isn't just any game, this is a revival of a cult classic, and I actually went back and played the NES version again just to make sure, and it confirmed everything I was feeling. The original still holds up. It's tighter, it's clearer, it's more readable, and most importantly, it's way more fun. And that's honestly the most disappointing part of this entire experience, because when you remake a game from 1988 in 2026, with everything we know now, it should feel like the definitive version. It should improve on the original in meaningful ways. Instead, it feels like it misunderstands what made the original work in the first place, and that's a tough pill to swallow as someone who grew up with it. Alright friends, now it's time for my final thoughts. The NewZealand Story Untold Adventure has the foundation of a great game. The core idea still works, the structure still works, and there are moments where you can feel flashes of what made the original so special, but the execution just isn't there. Between the sterile presentation, poor visual clarity, imprecise controls, and inconsistent performance, this ends up feeling like a major missed opportunity. And then there's the price. This game is $20, and I'll be honest, I genuinely thought this was going to be under $10 based on what it delivers. I didn't check the price until after I reviewed the game. So at this price point, I expect a level of polish, consistency, and care, and this just doesn't meet that bar. And that makes it even harder, obviously, to recommend. So for me, this is absolutely not getting a Thunderstruck recommendation. If you're curious about this series, I would honestly recommend going back and playing the original, because even today, that game still delivers the charm, challenge, and the fun that this remake just couldn't capture. And in this case, they really should have just followed the title and left this story untold. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let me know in the comments. Did you play the original, and how do you feel about this remake? Also, don't forget to check out the Nintendo Bite podcast, which I co-host every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, live right here on the channel with Nintendo Prime, Gamebird Classic, and Eric Moore. We're joined by both new and reoccurring game industry guests each week from across the gaming community, where we discuss everything happening in the world of Nintendo, like new games, predictions, Nintendo Directs, you name it. So if you enjoy discussing video games and game industry conversations, come hang out with us live, be part of the show. It's always a great time. And as always, remember, you're never too old to play video games.